June 6, 1944. 0:30. A young American paratrooper plunges through the night sky over Normandy, 70 pounds of equipment strapped to his body, his rifle, his grenades, his ammunition, and hooked to his pistol belt, 1 quart of water sealed inside a kidney-shaped aluminum container that cost the United States government roughly $1 to manufacture. In the chaos that followed, when his unit scattered across flooded Norman fields and hedgerow country, when German machine guns raked the darkness and men died before their boots touched French soil, that single quart of water meant survival. The M1910 Canteen, a piece of standard equipment so ordinary that no soldier ever thought twice about it, and so essential that millions would have perished without it. This is the untold story of the cheapest, most durable, and most widely issued piece of hydration equipment in American military history. Before 1909, American soldiers carried water the same way their grandfathers had during the Civil War. Wooden barrel canteens that warped, cracked, and leaked. Tin flasks that dented, rusted, and contaminated whatever liquid they held. These primitive containers had served through the Indian Wars, the Spanish-American War, and the Philippine insurrection. But as the 20th century dawned, the United States Army recognized a fundamental truth. Modern warfare demanded modern equipment. The Infantry Equipment Board convened in 1909 with a mandate to redesign the American soldiers' load-bearing gear from the ground up. Among dozens of items under review, one stood out as critically underdeveloped: the canteen. Field tests using approximately 800 prototype canteens, cups, and covers produced a clear winner: aluminum, lightweight, corrosion-resistant, durable enough to survive the rigors of combat. The Aluminum Goods Manufacturing Company of Two Rivers, Wisconsin, received the first production contract. By 1910, the new canteen had an official designation: the M1910. The design was elegantly simple: a 1-quart kidney-shaped body, fashioned from aluminum, curved to rest comfortably against a soldier's hip, a threaded neck with a screw-on cap attached by a small brass chain to prevent loss in the field. The distinctive shape allowed the canteen to nest perfectly inside an accompanying aluminum cup, which in turn slid into a canvas cover lined with wool felt. Total weight, empty, just over 1 pound. Total capacity, approximately 946 cubic centimeters, enough water to sustain a soldier through hours of hard marching under a blazing sun. But the true genius of the M1910 system lay in its canvas cover. That wool-felt lining served two critical purposes that transformed a simple water container into a temperature regulation device. In summer heat, soldiers soaked the cover in water. As the moisture evaporated, it created a cooling effect that could drop the temperature of the canteen's contents by several degrees. Under a scorching Arizona sun or in the tropical humidity of the Philippines, this evaporative cooling meant the difference between lukewarm liquid and refreshingly cool water. In winter, that same felt lining provided insulation, slowing the rate at which water froze in sub-zero conditions. Rock Island Arsenal took over production by 1912, developing a welding technique that eliminated the need for expensive patented spinning processes. 2 stamped aluminum halves joined by a vertical seam around the outer edge. Simple, reliable, cheap to manufacture at scale. The infrastructure was in place. The design was proven. And then came the war that would test it beyond anything the Equipment Board had imagined. By the time American doughboys began arriving in France in 1917, the Western Front had devoured men for 3 years. The trenches stretched nearly 500 miles from the English Channel to the Swiss border. Poison gas drifted across no man's land. Artillery transformed farmland into cratered moonscapes of mud and death, and water. Clean drinking water became one of the most precious commodities on Earth. The trenches were wet, paradoxically, impossibly, horrifically wet. Soldiers stood waist-deep in freezing water that seeped through the clay soil, but that water was death in liquid form. Contaminated by human waste, decomposing bodies, and chemical residue from artillery shells, the groundwater could not be consumed without catastrophic consequences. Dysentery swept through the ranks. Soldiers who drank from shell holes, desperate with thirst, suffered bacterial infections of the intestines that led to severe dehydration. And dehydration in the trenches often proved fatal. Clean drinking water had to be transported to the front lines in petrol cans, then purified with chemicals that left a bitter, metallic taste. Soldiers carried their personal supply in their M1910 canteens, carefully rationing every precious sip. 1 quart. That was all they had until resupply reached them through the communication trenches, and resupply was never guaranteed. German artillery targeted supply routes with methodical precision. Carrying parties moved at night through mud that sucked at their boots, hauling ammunition, food, and water to men who had been parched for days. The Quartermaster Corps contracted 5 domestic manufacturers to meet the explosive demand: Aluminum Goods Manufacturing Company, Buckeye Aluminum Company, and 3 others worked around the clock. Between 10 and 11 million canteens were produced for United States forces in World War I alone. 11 million individual containers, each one representing a soldier who needed water to fight, to survive, to come home. The M1910 proved its worth in conditions that would have destroyed lesser equipment. Soldiers reported using their canteens as improvised tools when proper equipment was unavailable. The sturdy aluminum body could take impacts that would have shattered glass or cracked wood. The simple screw-cap mechanism functioned reliably even when caked in trench mud. And when the canvas covers wore through from constant use, soldiers simply requisitioned replacements and kept going. After the armistice, production effectively ceased. Warehouses filled with surplus canteens that seemed destined never to see combat again. The war to end all wars had ended. The M1910 entered storage, coated in preservative grease, stacked by the hundreds of thousands in military depots across the country. 23 years passed. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor burned, and America faced the same crisis it had confronted in 1917. Millions of soldiers needed equipment, immediately. The M1910 canteens in those warehouses came out of storage. Workers wiped away the Cosmoline, replaced deteriorated leather slings with fresh canvas straps, and shipped them to training camps across the nation. National Guard units received them by the hundreds of thousands. Home defense forces carried them on coastal patrols. Young recruits learning to be soldiers drank from the same canteens their fathers had carried in the Argonne forest. But aluminum had become a strategic material. Every pound of aluminum that went into a canteen was a pound that could not go into a bomber. The aircraft industry demanded priority, so the military developed an alternative. Corrosive-resistant steel, what soldiers called stainless steel, could be stamped into canteen halves and soldered together with a horizontal seam. The M1942 was born. Same basic shape, same capacity, different material. Yet production of aluminum M1910 canteens resumed when restrictions eased later in 1942. Both types served side by side throughout the war. In North Africa, where the desert sun baked men until they hallucinated from heat stroke, canteens meant life. In the Pacific, where tropical diseases claimed nearly as many casualties as Japanese bullets, hydration was the first line of defense against debilitating illness. And in Europe, from the beaches of Normandy to the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the M1910 and its steel sibling accompanied American soldiers through every major campaign. The Canteen cup proved as versatile as the canteen itself. Soldiers used it to boil water for coffee over small fires, the folding handle extended to protect their hands from the heat. They heated rations in it. They shaved from it. During the Battle of the Bulge, paratroopers of the 101st Airborne gathered snow from frozen trees, melted it in their canteen cups, and brewed coffee while German artillery fell around them. The cup was not just a drinking vessel, it was a field kitchen, a hygiene station, and a morale booster wrapped into 1 pound of metal. Paratrooper equipment lists from D-Day specifically included the canteen, cup, and cover as essential gear. Cartridge belt with canteen, the standard loadout read. Men jumping into darkness over hostile territory, uncertain whether they would survive the night, carried water as carefully as they carried ammunition. Because without water, ammunition was worthless. Without water, a soldier stopped being a soldier and became a casualty waiting to happen. The Bataan Death March revealed the canteen's value through its absence. When Japanese forces captured American and Filipino soldiers in April of 1942, they confiscated personal equipment, including canteens. For the next 65 miles, prisoners received almost no water despite the tropical heat. Men drank from ditches, from puddles contaminated with waste, from any source they could find. One survivor later testified that a Japanese soldier took his canteen, gave the water to a horse, and threw the canteen away. The stronger were not permitted to help the weaker. Thousands died from dehydration and its complications. A single quart of water, the contents of one M1910 canteen, might have saved countless lives. After World War II, the M1910 remained in service. Korea, Vietnam. The same basic design, refined but fundamentally unchanged, accompanied American soldiers into new conflicts on new continents. Marine Corps units commonly used M1910 covers well into the Vietnam War. Production continued into the 1960s, more than half a century after the original design was adopted. Think about what that means. A piece of military equipment designed before the first airplane crossed the Atlantic Ocean remained standard issue when men walked on the moon. No significant redesign, no fundamental changes, because the original engineers got it right the first time. The felt-lined cover, the nested cup, the kidney-shaped aluminum body. Every element served a purpose. Every component was field-proven across decades of combat in every climate on Earth. From the frozen Chosin Reservoir to the steaming jungles of Southeast Asia, soldiers trusted their lives to equipment their great-grandfathers would have recognized. Modern soldiers carry hydration bladders with drinking tubes and quick-release connectors. Technology has advanced, materials have improved. But walk through any military installation today, and you will still find canteens. Traditional, cup-equipped, belt-mounted canteens. Because some designs endure for reasons that transcend specifications and procurement contracts. The canteen is personal. Soldiers form attachments to their canteens in ways they never would to shared water supplies. A canteen belongs to an individual soldier. It travels in their kit. It bears their marks, their dents, their history. Army medics today report that troops still reach for canteens in the field even when hydration packs are available, because a canteen in hand provides psychological reassurance that water bladders cannot match. The canteen cup remains indispensable for field cooking and personal hygiene. No hydration bladder can boil water for coffee. No plastic tube can double as a shaving basin. The technology that makes modern hydration systems possible also limits their versatility. The canteen and cup, simple as they are, remain adaptable to situations their designers never anticipated. Collectors today prize original M1910 canteens from both World Wars. The kidney-shaped silhouette has become an icon of American military history, instantly recognizable in photographs, films, and museum displays. Original specimens in good condition sell for substantial sums, valued not just as artifacts, but as functional equipment that works as well today as it did a century ago. Some collectors drink from their vintage canteens, though this practice requires caution. Certain World War II stainless steel canteens used lead-based solder that can leach into stored liquids. The vertical seam aluminum canteens from World War I and early World War II generally pose no such risk. The materials and construction methods that made them safe for soldiers in 1918 make them safe for collectors today. The M1910 canteen represents something larger than its specifications suggest. It embodies American industrial capability at its best. Simple design, rugged construction, massive production. When the nation needed to equip millions of soldiers with reliable hydration equipment, manufacturers delivered. They delivered cheaply. They delivered quickly. They delivered equipment that functioned flawlessly in conditions ranging from Arctic cold to tropical heat. $1. That was approximately what it cost to manufacture an M1910 canteen during peak wartime production. $1 for a piece of equipment that could keep a soldier alive through the worst conditions warfare could offer. $1 for technology that remained essentially unchanged for 6 decades. $1 for a design so elegant that modern equipment still has not entirely replaced it. The rifle gets the glory. The helmet gets the recognition. The canteen gets overlooked. But history is made by soldiers who can fight, and soldiers cannot fight without water. The doughboys in the Meuse Argonne, the paratroopers over Normandy, the Marines at Iwo Jima, the infantry at Pusan. Every American soldier in every major conflict of the 20th century carried water in a descendant of that 1910 design. Tens of millions of canteens, hundreds of millions of quarts of water, countless lives sustained by aluminum, canvas, and felt. The $1 canteen that hydrated more troops than any bottle America ever made. The equipment that history forgot, but logistics loved. That is the untold story of the M1910. If you want to understand how America won its wars, do not start with the weapons. Start with the water. Start with the simple truth that soldiers who can drink can fight, and soldiers who cannot drink cannot survive. Subscribe for more forgotten tales of the equipment that sustained American soldiers through a century of conflict. The arsenal of democracy was built on more than guns and bombs. It was built on canteens and coffee cups, blankets and boots, the humble gear that kept fighting men alive long enough to win. The next episode explores another piece of overlooked equipment that changed military history forever.